Welcome to Theory Paranormal's episode 3. I am Pax, your host, with Dalton, my fellow team member of Theory Paranormal. And today's podcast episode, we're going to be talking about a variety of equipment that we have used when we have went investigating in the field. So without further ado, I will present you with Dalton, and he will get us started.
How you doing today, Pax?
Doing pretty good, Dalton. So from what I understand, you are out and about right now with what you do in your normal adulting life. So you are actually called in right now while we are doing this podcast session.
That I am calling from Indiana today.
All right, good stuff. So
So if they hear weird stuff, it's not because I'm on a regular mic. I'm on a headset talking, so I might sound a little weirder than normal.
alrighty. Well, I always tend to think that I was, the better sounding one out of both of us, but that's just me.
Well, yeah, you can pat yourself on the back. It's no problem.
So,
But yeah, we're gonna talk about some gear, different gear that we've used, and then what kind of experiences we've had using that gear, if any, and then probably talk a little bit of history and technology, the technical end of some of the gear too, as well, right?
Yep, that's what I believe our focus is today. So with that being said, what's a piece of equipment that you used when you investigated the paranormal, and you actually enjoyed using, and tell the followers and listeners why.
I've used quite a bit of equipment. I don't really think I have a favorite, though, to be honest with you. A lot of the gear, I guess, like an interesting piece of gear I can off the top of my head talk about is the mailmeter. The mailmeter is cool because it gives off an ambient temp, and it also acts as an EMF detector at the same time. But the story behind the mailmeter is pretty interesting. I don't know if you know the story behind that.
Okay, go ahead and share. What's the story about?
Well, the mailmeter 8704, this guy Gary, he was a electrical engineer, and his daughter passed away, and the shows come out, and he was watching some of the shows, and so he decided to build some test equipment. He started testing out different equipment to try to communicate with his daughter.
You're referencing paranormal shows on TV at the time?
Yeah, that's where he kind of, after she had passed, he was watching some of the shows, and he caught on to what they were doing. Like, they were using different types of gear to communicate with the other side. So being that he was an electrical engineer, he started creating his own stuff that he kept trying out to communicate with her. And it was right around her birthday, I believe, that they got a lot of communication. It seems like every birthday there's some kind of communication, like something would move in the house, or the keys would be in another location. You know what I mean? It's something she was doing to try to, lights flickering or whatever, to try to communicate. So long story short, he created this mailmeter 8704. Now, 87 was the year that she was born, and 2004 was the year that she died.
Oh.
So that, and they call it a mailmeter because her name was Melissa.
Okay.
And her nickname was Mel, so he named it the mailmeter 8704. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story on how that device came to be.
Yeah, I'm definitely personally familiar with it. It's one of the better electromagnetic frequency detectors I've personally used. Like you did state, it does do dual fold between detecting the EMF fields and detecting temperature at the same time. I know that there's a few variety of models that have been made over the years. The reason why I liked it specifically, because if I can have a device that does multiple things at the same time, that's less for me to lug around when I'm doing investigations. And it's nice to be able to have real-time measurements scientifically accurate to see what's what. I've had some equipment in the past where, they say they gauge the temperature in the ambient environment and stuff, and not so much, unfortunately, which kind of made things a little bit more difficult when you're trying to get a precise reading. So,
Well, the millimeter here too. Also, our 0.2 is our baseline.
for
When we
detecting what?
detecting the EMF, electromagnetic fields.
Okay.
Um, when we walk around, because when we do an investigation, we'll walk around with the K2 or an EMF detector, and we'll find the hot spots. Could be a leaking electrical outlet, a leaking light switch, and that way at night when all the lights are out, if we're walking past that area and our K2 or our EMF goes off, then we know, okay, where are we? Are we standing near the electrical leak that we found? So on the millimeter, our base reading is always 0.2. I think it's everywhere we've been was like 0.1, 0.2 is like a flat line. There's nothing there. And a lot of times when we investigate, we can have the millimeter sitting there. I've had it sitting there, and as well as I do. You happen to look down and you're getting like a 1.6 or a 3.2 or whatever. It's a really high number, and you're sitting in the middle of a room and you're not near an outlet or any kind of electrical switch or anything.
Yep.
And what's cool about that is that you can actually have the entity or the spirit adjust that. So let's say you're sitting at 1.2 and you say, hey, can you drop that to 0.7? And they'll actually drop it to 0.7, or they'll raise it. Say you want to go to 1.8 or 2.0, they'll raise it to 2.0. The other cool thing, like you mentioned, is the ambient temperature, because they can also play with the temperature. They can make that temperature a little warmer or a little cooler, however you want. And that's how you know that you're basically dealing with an intelligent entity, not nothing else. So I think that's pretty cool with that device there.
Yep, most definitely. I think for myself, a device that I appreciated back in the day, there was this big kick on these things called spirit boxes. And I kind of touched based on it on a previous of our podcasts, or ghost box or radio box, depending on, if you're familiar with any of those phrases.
Yeah, Frank's box, spirit box.
So with the particular item that I used in the beginning, was a PSB7 spirit box. And the reason why I really appreciated this box, because you could actually control how quick it jumps the frequencies around. And it's small, it's portable. You could put an earphone in it if you wanted to. It was backlit, lit up. And it was really nice because it didn't take up a lot of space. I could put it in my front pocket comfortably if I wore blue jeans that were semi-tight even. Not skinny jeans, but just regular blue jeans.
Yeah, no skinny jeans.
Usually preference is skinny jeans. That's what he likes. But
nope.
I like this particular device.
So you said the SB7? The SB7 is what you used?
Yep. The PSB7 spirit box. And
okay.
The reason why I liked it was because it had multiple options, and it was small form factor, and it did exactly what I needed, and it was loud enough to where you could hear commentary coming back to you between the frequency jumps, between the radio stations, nice and clear. And to being able to slow up or speed up the frequency of it jumping also really was nice. So as far as it goes for me, that was the very first item. As far as it goes for me getting into that aspect of using ghost box, radio boxes, spirit boxes, and listening and being able to hear things that, you're sitting there in a room by yourself in an empty place, nobody's around, and you start getting relevant feedback to questions that you're throwing out there. 1-2 liners of words. You're like, you can't make this up. There's not somebody listening at a radio station chiming in, you know. It's just
Right. So
it's
that
just too awesome.
that skips through the FM and AM radio channels. Is that how it works?
Correct. Exactly that. Spirit boxes are made to where if you were just in a car and you're listening to the radio and you say, okay, you want to just hit the seek button or next, and it just goes to the next frequency, which is the strongest signal. Then it's there. And the spirit boxes will just do that. And the theory is, in between going from one radio station to the next, you have dead space in the middle. And that dead space in the middle is where hypothetically spirits can take that energy of the radio stations, because it's everywhere, and put stuff back out that we can hear. We meaning humans. It's pretty neat when
And
it
did you
happens.
know that that is cool, because I've used the there's the you got the SB7, but they also have the SB11, I believe it is, that has two. It's like a dual box, basically. I've seen somebody use one before. I don't know if it actually worked as good as the 7 that you're talking about. I kind of like the 7 a little bit better. But the Frank's box, have you ever heard of a Frank's box?
Yes, I have.
So Frank's box, he come out with the Frank's box in like 2002, I believe it was. And that was like a little bit clearer communication. Not as clear as the satellite radio that we used that one time that we kept talking about how we wore our fingers out because we had to keep turning the knob.
Yeah. Yep. That was a that was a long night.
That was a very long night, and we did get a full sentence out of that one. But the one thing that's very interesting about a spirit box is that I believe back in 1920, I want to say 1920, Thomas Edison actually dabbled in the paranormal and attempted to build a spirit box, which he also called a spirit phone, to try to communicate with the other side. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I have done research in reference to the paranormal, actually going all the way back to the mid to early 1800s, because I wanted to see chronologically how the paranormal affected society and their opinions and viewpoints going all the way up to current day, actually. But I always appreciate hearing that particular fact about Thomas Edison, because it's something I don't believe a lot of people are used to hearing.
No, a lot of people don't actually know that Thomas actually dabbled with that and tried to create an actual spirit box back in the 19. I think it was 1920. I want to say, because the SPR, the Society for Physical Research, that was some early hunts by those folks back in the 19th century, I want to say. But Thomas Edison, man, it's kind of a unique thing to learn that he actually dabbled with the paranormal. It makes you wonder. I'm looking for a certain word. I always get lost with words, but it just makes you wonder, like, wow, Thomas Edison, what is he known for? He created the light bulb. Okay. But did you know he dabbled in the paranormal? No, we did not. That's what you get out of a lot of people.
Yeah. There's just so much information out there. It's really, daunting to try to keep tabs and track of all the developments and the changes over the times. There's tons of amazing information. The internet is definitely our savior when it comes to research. So is local libraries, historians, professors at universities. It all depends on where we're at, what's going on, and what we have at our disposal to be able to try to glean information to help us with our investigations.
Yeah, and then some equipment like dowsing rods. I don't trust a dowsing rod. It's something I probably would never use. I watched somebody use them, and you just can't tell if it's a jerking motion from their fingers and they don't realize it. Because dowsing rods, they normally are used to find water, buried metals, and stuff like that. Usually people will hold them one in each hand and then have the spirit try to turn them or whatnot. And to me, it's when you got something physically in your hand like that, I don't know if I trust that or not. How about you? Do you trust something like that?
You know, the dowsing rods, the principles on that, two pieces of metal, like Dalton said. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. It goes to the ley lines that run across the earth, which are natural principles of energy, if you want to call it that way, that literally envelop the earth in grid patterns and run from point A to point B across everywhere. There's multiple. And also, they're affected by energy. We all know energy that we learned in science is usually comprised of three different ways. It's either going to be a solid, it's going to be a gas, or a liquid. Also, namely, dowsing rods can be affected by minerals compositions, which is another form of energy. I've seen multiple people use them, and sometimes they're very successful. And I've seen multiple people use them to where they do not work whatsoever. It's kind of like when you buy that battery and you think you're all set to replace that battery that's bad at the house, and then you get home and it doesn't work, and you're like, wait a minute. Well, that's a lot of how paranormal equipment is. Sometimes it works as advertised, as you hope it is, as you've seen on TV. And sometimes it's just like, nope, dead on arrival, doesn't do anything. It's a great paperweight.
So have you personally, like, been on an investigation and had somebody use dowsing rods, and you thought that was a legit way to communicate with the spirits without them? Now, see, I could see like taking those rods and sticking them in something, then with nobody holding on to them, just put them in like a holder, and then have the spirit move those things. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you see, now you're getting into the part, Dalton, where you're talking about manipulation of a form of using energy. Um, for the listeners, a lot of people that think of energy, they think of, positive and negative electrons. You got protons, but it goes deeper than that. You have energy with frequencies, okay? Frequencies of UHF, VHF, VLF, alpha, beta, gamma rays, the list goes on and on. So you have multiple things that can influence everything that's around us that we can touch, taste, smell, see, feel, or none of those, but yet it's still there. I wholeheartedly believe, whether it's a dowsing rod or it's a different piece of equipment, that if the other side wants to convey something to you, they're going to make it happen, point blank.
And what do you think? What do you think, though? I mean, because we tested. Didn't you test a theory like for the gamma? You're talking radiation. So
it for any of it, all of it is a form of energy. So that energy can be used in a manifestation way to make something happen. Because, I mean, think about it. You have a car, has a alternator to get your battery charged and all that good stuff. At the end of the day, that battery just sits there. That battery's there. Its main purpose is to give that car a jump start. Okay? So that battery is just energy. You can use that battery for multiple things besides just jump starting that car if you really need to. Pull it out and do a whole bunch of other things. But the reason why I brought up all those different modalities of energy is because they're different forms of expression for what I believe is the other side to be able to leech off of or take and use to assist them to do the different things they want to do potentially.
What do you think the most common? What do you think the most common? I mean, that's something that we're still. I mean, I'll let the listeners know that's something that we're still testing out. What first of all, you talked about frequencies a second ago,
Mm-hmm.
so we're also testing frequencies, but also what kind of energy they might be putting out to communicate.
Well,
Um,
well, what they utilize to do things with versus what they put out. I
yeah, do you think they use something that's in the area, or they like okay, so like my soul, like is energy or whatever, and
mm-hmm.
I pass away, and my energy travels out. Now, my energy obviously ain't gamma. It wouldn't be considered like radioactive. It would be just considered what form of energy would you call that then?
Well, here to lend credence to what Dalton's talking about, everybody, look at it like this, and this is a provable fact through science, through modern medicine. The CNS system of the human body, or central nervous system, actually yields a minute amount of literal electrical impulse energy that is measurable. Okay. So there is scientific equipment that they can literally jab into you, engage wherever they put the two different probes, say your ankle all the way up to your upper thigh. They can gauge an electrical impulse of energy going from point A to point B. And they'll say, okay, this is working, it's going fine, or it's not. The reason why I bring that point up is the human body does have its own form of energy. That's part of the nervous system and everything else. So what Dalton's saying at the end of the day, I believe he would just wants to know where that energy goes. I believe between studies that I've read about, white papers that I've seen published on medical periodicals, and different levels within the medical academia industry, I believe eventually when someone passes away that energy that's comprised in the body just dissipates. It is a verifiable fact, it's measurable, that they can see, and they meaning medical professionals can see a drop in the amount of energy conductivity within the body after somebody unfortunately expires and passes away. So,
So anyway, I'm not trying to get off subject here, but it's interesting. The energy aspect of it's interesting. So it's like kinetic energy. So we do have like a radiant energy, a thermal energy, electrical energy, sound energy. I mean, there's a few different types of energies I believe that the body
can generate.
plays off of.
Right. And then if you want to prescribe to the metaphysical realm, I mean, then you got tons of stuff, at disposal. I mean, then you can talk about energies with the chakras, which are different power points of your core system on a metaphysical level, if you believe in that. You have your etherical energy, which is around you. You have energy coming from the different planes or astral planes, as they're coined and talked about. And then different planes that aren't even astral. For anybody that doesn't know what I'm referencing at the moment, if and when you have time and you are curious about anything I just stated, please look up astral planes and just do a little bit of research. And many people that are way more professional and astute in that genre and area of modality will have tons of information that you can glean from and become more knowledgeable about it. So, with that being said, Dalton, what other piece of equipment have you used that you've really enjoyed?
Well, of course, when I started out, I had a K2 meter. Was probably one of the first devices I've ever used. In fact, that was probably the only device when I started. I had one K2 meter.
And what exactly is a K2 meter? If you can just paint the picture for everybody.
It consists of both electric and magnetic charge. Kind of like what I said, you can electricians use them. You can actually find electrical leaks, like if your socket or your light switch is leaking, you can actually detect the leakage, because we'll go into it in another podcast, but the EMF that it gives off can also play with your mind, as far as, you know, the spiritual realm. Like, you could think you'd be seeing things and you're not. That's why we do a base reading with that K2, because if we find like a whole panel that's leaking like crazy, then that's when we go to like the medical side, which would be them just being exposed to a lot of EMF, and they're not really seeing things. It's just the electric magnetic field. So K2, that's the first one I've ever bought, and it has multiple colors on it. Of course, the higher it goes into an orange and a red color. But basically, if the energy when the energy that the spirit gives off communicates, it can either go up really high, or it can go low, or it can go medium. But yeah, that's pretty much like I told you before. I'm not really a tech guy, so you got to bear with me on this stuff. But I will say that it was and to this day, a K2 meter is probably one of the most useful tools that we have used. Have you ever had any good experiences with a K2 meter?
I've had numerous experiences. I've had good experiences, I've had bad experiences, and I've had mediocre experiences. Kind of reminds me of my date life in high school. Anyways, so
what's a bad experience you've had with a K2? What do you mean by that?
A bad experience with the K2 is you get false positives. And what I mean by a false positive is you go into an area and you're getting activity, and you're like, okay, this is really happening. For anybody that's not aware, when you go in to do an investigation, you want to do preliminary readings. So you go in before you have any other gear or anything that's going on. You want to be able to walk around all the different locations in a clockwise fashion or counterclockwise, whatever, and see it's the investigator. But you just want to go around and check everything out, so you can see where the bleed areas are. You can see where the EMF is leaking, or it's super strong, or not. So that way.
So basically, the base reading, like I was talking about, the 0.2 or the on a K2, you don't have numbers. You just got lights. So
right. So at the end of the day, I had a few experiences where I thought I was getting activity, and come to find out, some of the power lines in this particular residence I was investigating, they weren't wired correctly. They weren't grounded correctly. And because of that simple situation, the power lines were throwing out all sorts of extra energy that they normally would not do if they were grounded.
Now, is this an older house? Because older houses, they got the electrical running under the floor.
Actually, for this one, it was a newer house. But
oh wow,
it was one of those situations of, I have a friend of a friend of a friend that can cut you a deal if you want him to come in and do the wiring. So it was one of those situations.
So it probably wasn't even the proper wiring or insulating.
Right.
I had an investigation where, like, it was an older house, so all the wiring was run. A lot of it was run underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you set the K2 on the floor, and after a little while, it's like it starts jumping, and then you realize, okay, this ain't jumping to my questions. Like, it's just randomly skipping. And so we kind of run it across the floor a little bit more, and then all of a sudden it peaks. And so we're like, hey, do y'all got like a crawl space or something under here? Because we didn't, at that time, we didn't really care, nor ever figured out that all the wiring was run underneath the house like that. Well, come to find out, being it was under the house, of course, some of the animals were eating through the insulation on the wires.
Oh, no.
Right. So basically you got exposed wires and it was giving false signals. So I definitely know what you're talking about there.
Yeah. And unfortunately, to the detriment, that was the main issue ultimately was bad wiring for that particular residence. Actually, was able to clarify some issues with dizziness and individuals thinking they're seeing stuff out of the corner of their eye. Even one particular individual feeling as if they had vertigo. Um, at the end of the day, being an investigator, I am more than happy to go into a location and walk away and not have any activity whatsoever. But if I can identify the hows or whys of what's causing a problem and present it to the individual or people that we're trying to assist and say, here you go, and they're able to take corrective measures, it's all the same to me. I know me and Dalton love going into environments and playing Sherlock Holmes and Watson and trying to figure things out. But it's not always cracked up to be, chairs getting thrown, sounds, all these crazy hijinks you see on TV shows. It's not like that. Sometimes it's a really watered down and just very laissez-faire on what's going on.
Yeah, I would say that's like 50-50, maybe 60-40. We do get a lot of investigations though, where we do have a lot of disembodied voices and stuff like that, and some stuff that moves. Not as often. You got to remember some of these shows, man. They're filming for like a whole week, like 7 days, and then they pick out parts, whatever they want you to see. But
yeah,
I tell you what irritates me the most with a K2 is that when somebody, you try to put the K2 down and then have everybody back off from the K2. The reason being is because somebody's cell phone can trigger that K2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever had that happen on investigation or not.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things is we'll get into it in another podcast, but there's certain, I would like to say, mannerisms or best practices certain teams or investigators do to try to have what I call a clean environment when they go to do an investigation. And if you don't check your boxes and cross your T's and dot your I's for everything, one little hiccup can throw everything askew that you literally just spent all night working to try to find a definitive answer or to give you something to link credence to something else that's going on. And it gets frustrating sometimes. I've definitely been
It's
there.
real frustrating.
Oh yeah, yeah. Me and Dalton definitely been there where we did joint investigations with other teams where we traveled across the country, and lo and behold, we think we're good to go, and somebody has a cell phone on their pocket that's turned on, and we start getting activity, and so we're presuming that hey, and that's not the case. Come to find out later, and it's like really. And nobody wants to put their hand up and say, oh, I'm sorry, that was me, because A, embarrassment, and B, everybody's there for the same reason, is to experience what normally no one's supposed to experience, but also figure stuff out. So,
and I'll go into another tool since we're talking about cell phones. And just to end that real quick, I do have, like everybody, I've learned my lesson on that. So when I put the K2 down, I just have everybody stand a good 5 or 10 feet back. Because you can always tell, like I had a guy real quick, he was standing close to the area, and all of a sudden we're getting it. What irritates me is we're getting communication. So the entity, the spirit, I'm telling them to put it on the second green light or the first yellow light, and it's doing exactly what I want it to do. And I'm in the middle of a question and a thought process, and all of a sudden it peaks to the red. And I look over at the dude and I go, "Did you just get a text or something?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Could you back up, please?" Because you just blew you just blew like 20 minutes worth of talking to somebody trying to get answers. And luckily it got quiet for a good 30 minutes, and then the the communication fired back up. Luckily, sometimes it doesn't, which that's where you've been standing there all this time, and that one little thing can just throw a wrinkle in it all. But talking about cell phones, there's another tool I use, and I like using it. I don't know if I'm pretty sure you've used it too. It's called Ghost Radar.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's a fun little. I call it a novelty app. That's fun to use, but
now you say an app. See, like people, and it is listed as a toy. Say,
hence
so it's a Ouija
novelty.
board, right?
A
Right.
novelty.
So a Ouija board's listed as a toy, and it really works. But anyway, that's another deal. But Ghost Radar is listed as a toy. But how many times have we pulled that Ghost Radar? I think it has 2,000 words, 2,500 words, or something like that. And
They.
how many words do you think?
I've utilized it anytime recently. I just know that the overall Rolodex, as I call it, of words, it's shifted around multiple times depending on the version you get and so forth. But the way the Ghost Radar app works, for anybody that's unfamiliar, is basically it's nothing more than an app you turn on your phone. Besides turning it on or quote unquote changing, I believe, the sensitivity from the last time I used it eons ago. That's it. And maybe some dots appear on the screen. But the thing about the device is it's supposedly hard coded with X amount of words, like a definition listing of just a bunch of words, not necessarily the phrases or explaining words, but just flat out words. Think of
No
northeast,
names.
just think northeast, southwest, yes, no, just descriptive words. And the theory behind it is you do nothing more than just let it sit there and run. And then you just have your normal conversation, do whatever you want for investigating, and then words will just pop up.
And you know what I call it? I call it the cheap Ovilus.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, because the Ovilus doesn't the Ovilus, if I'm pronouncing that right, doesn't it do the same thing? Like it just pops up words
Yes,
in the Ovilus.
it does.
Right. So instead of paying like $100 for an Ovilus, I paid what 99 cents for this app, and it pretty much.
Yeah, and the Ovilus is another paranormal device that is on the market. Probably still is, but this is an actual device that actually has a memory chip in it, and that's hard coded of words versus just a software app. So the Ovilus you could actually carry around with you and utilize it the same way. And I've actually used it before very successfully. Very successfully.
Well, you can tote the Ghost Radar with you on your phone, and it does have. I use it all the time actually, and the reason being is because it does have a Rolodex of words. Like it can say cat, dog, train, horn, green, yellow. I mean, it's got a full Rolodex of words, kind of like the Ovilus does, but it doesn't have any names. There's not supposed to be any names. So if a name pops up, then obviously something's communicating with you. Now, as far as little dots on the screen or whatever, I don't know. Never tested the theory of those. I think that's part of the actual toy. But for the spirit to actually manipulate the phone, and I don't know how many times I've tried to tell people, like one guy, for instance, was very skeptic about it. And we were in his office. This is just me. Actually, I was fixing his AC unit, to be honest with you. And I come down to the office and he started telling me, I hear you're in the paranormal. Of course, you get that all the time when they all got a story they want to tell you. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, my dad passed away and I have a feeling he's still in the office. And so I said, well, let's find out, because I was sensing something, I was kind of feeling something. And so I pulled up my phone. He goes, what's that? And I said, I'm going to use this little radar I use. And, we'll see. And he goes, well, that's just an app on your phone. I said, yeah, but let's just see, because I've had some pretty good luck with this thing. And yes, it does spit out single words, but like the Ovilus, you got to do kind of the same thing. You got to kind of figure out what the meaning is behind that word, like what they're trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I said, all right, let's try it out. So I set this phone down on his desk right in front of me. Okay. And I sat back in the chair and I was like, if there's anybody here that wants to communicate with us, I did the opening speech, my name, his name. And the first thing out of it Now, out of all the words that this thing could choose, the first thing out of it was knife.
Really?
Yep. And so I look at him and I go, knife, okay. And the second word was white. So at first, I'm kind of thinking, I wasn't paying attention to the guy across from me. I was just kind of thinking to myself, okay, knife and white, where are we going? Where, where are we? What are we talking? Is this random or what are we? I'm thinking to myself, what are we doing? And I look over at him, and he has this ghostly look on his face. He's just in awe. He's just like, "Wow, dude, you can cut that off." And I said, "Dude, it just got started. We just got started." He goes, "No." He's like, "Cut that off, man. Just cut it off." I said, "Okay." I cut it off. And I said, "Why did you have me cut it off? I didn't notice this, okay?" And he points down at the desk right within a foot from my phone. Guess what was sitting there? A knife with a
Really?
white handle.
Wow.
And he said that was my dad's knife that he always carried with him in his pocket. That's what he used.
Hmm.
So I always, because I always joke with people, kind of like the lady at, you remember we did Ashley's in Rockledge there.
Rockledge where?
Ashley's, was it Ashley's restaurant or whatever that was? That building sat right on the train tracks there. Was it Ashley's?
Yep, I believe so.
Yep. Anyway, they had that fire that one time, and we were upstairs where that fire was, and it kept, like, I put the ghost radar on it. It said hot, burn, and then all of a sudden the chick was like, "Oh, my arm feels like it's burning." So anytime it does that, I always look at people and I go, "It's a toy, though. Remember that." Like, remember, it's just a toy. But out of all the words that it can speak, it's actually talking about the investigation. So that, you figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything is, in the paranormal world, this is the best way I can surmise my experience and just put it out there. I used to be very analytical, logical, matter of fact, black and white thinking, and scientific, and that's it. And it didn't make a difference what you showed me or what you referenced or what you pointed to. If I could not have it make any sort of sense for a baseline, I just was like, okay, that's your opinion. I respect it, but okay, thanks. And when you become an investigator with the paranormal, and if you are lucky, and I emphasize the word lucky, to have an experience or maybe 2 or 3 experiences, that's uncommon. But over time, you start having more experiences. And those experiences, what I mean by that is maybe hearing a voice, maybe seeing something, maybe being scratched. There's multitude of things that can happen. All of my experiences, I'm not going to say made me a believer, but made me realize there is way more to life than anything I've been ever able to read anywhere to give it credence. And it changed.
and you can like, and that's when we talked about the last episode. I think we talked about it in both last 2 episodes, and that's where you become more open-minded.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it takes that first. So let's look at it this way. And my mother, bless her soul, she always thought like she didn't want to know about nothing. She didn't want to know about anything that I'm doing. Right.
Okay.
So, she just flat out believed heaven and hell. She's going somewhere. You know what I mean? There's a God, there's a devil, blah, blah, blah. I'm going somewhere. I don't want to know about people hanging out, in what may be called purgatory or whatever. And I said, no, it's not like that. But anyway, long story short, I was in the house one time and my daughters were with me, and my youngest daughter, she has a gift that I had to shut off. I haven't heard lately if she's had any issues, but
now, just real quick, just to jump in there, when you say gift, what are you referencing?
she can actually see. So she used to, when she was younger, of course, remember what I said about younger kids, they're more open-minded.
Okay, so you're
She could
talking
actually
like see like
see the shadow
shadows
figures.
or okay.
Yeah, she can. Okay, so like I can hear things. She sees things,
Okay.
and so anyway, so I was standing in my mom's house, and I was like, oh, my chest, is tightening up. I was kind of rubbing my chest. We were talking about a friend of mine that when I was a kid, he taught me how to roller skate, and he died on a motorcycle up in Illinois.
Sorry to hear.
And so, yeah, he was a great guy. His name was Dave. He was actually Elvis Presley's friend in the military. He actually had gold and platinum albums that because Elvis didn't have no more room, so he gave them to Dave, and Dave hung them on his own wall. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy, but
wow.
Yeah, he was a cool cat. But he was, the only thing he had was a motorcycle. It was wintertime, and he wound up sliding under a car, and it killed him. So every year on his it was either his birth date or his death date, my mom would have my sister go down and put a rose on his grave for her every year without missing a beat. So my sister, she wound up moving down here, and she was staying with my mom for a while. And anyway, we were there, and we were talking about Dave, and everything started, all my senses started clicking, click, 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 And so my daughter says, well, you're sensing something. And I was like, shh, be quiet. Because, my mother, she don't want to know nothing like that.
Right.
So my mother looks at me and she goes, what are you sensing? And my other daughter goes, he's sensing a ghost. And before I could say anything, I had my box with me with all my stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go back to the K2 meter since we're talking about equipment. She brought the K2 meter in the room. So long story short, K2 went off. It went down, didn't do anything. I moved to the other side of the bed. It went off. And it was like this entity was moving around. Again, ghost radar, right? This toy that everybody calls it a toy. But I turned on ghost radar. I put a flashlight over on a chair, and I put the K2 meter right by, not by the phone, but like within 6 feet or so of the phone. Because I think we measured it out, like anything over 5 feet, it doesn't really read the signal. It won't catch the signal of the cell phone. So I moved it like 6, 7 feet out, put the K2 down. Of course, we didn't get any flashlight activity, but we did get some K2 hits. And all of a sudden, the ghost radar came up with the word skate. And at first, I'm not thinking straight. I'm just sitting there going, skate, okay, skate. Because this is back when I was, probably 7, 8, 9 years old or whatever, when I used to roller skate. And Dave, yeah, so he taught me how to skate and stuff. And so anyway, long story short, it threw up a couple more words. And my mom looked at me, and she looked like, we were in the dark, but there was some light shining on her, and I could tell she was looked like she was crying. And I was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. And she looked at me, she goes, I can't believe this is all happening, blah, blah, blah. Do you know who that is? And I said, no, I don't got the slightest idea, but obviously he's here, or it's here. And she goes, that's Dave. And so I'm not going to finish the story. I'll finish it another time. But my point is, she became a believer. And so her mind, so we're getting back to the open mind, right? So when you're not, this is my point, because after she became a believer and aware, now you remember they came with us to Casadega, both her and my stepdad. They both came with us to Casadega.
Where's Casadega at again?
Casadega, Florida.
Okay.
And you remember they came there, and then he was kind of tripping out because he was talking about the slaves coming up from South Florida. They walked up to the north, and all the flashlights were going off and all. So they both became believers. So now here's what happens. your mind is open now. It's not open all the way. It's not open like we're open because we've been doing this for so long. Our mind is like open.
So you're talking like a water faucet, like barely turned on, but it's a little trickle, right?
Right, right. So what happened was after the Casadega, after the little bit of the house experience, then after Casadega, they went to her classroom reunion up in St. Louis, and this picture is on the Theory Paranormal Facebook page. I believe there's 3 of them, but Dennis was trying to, my stepdad, he was trying to get the phone, the flash to work on the phone. It wouldn't work, so he just kept taking pictures.
Okay.
And lo and behold, they picked up a full colored apparition of a woman walking behind my mother and her friend.
Get out of here. No way.
And yes, sir. And so she sent me the picture. She goes, "Oh my God, look at this." So my point of that is that they're open-minded now. You know, they've been opened up to this, and now they're actually seeing it. So with you, is like me, is that we don't, like we said before, we don't sit there and go, "Oh, that's fake" or whatever. I'm not worrying about it, because no, we're going, "What is that?" And we run to it. But our mind keeps, over time, your mind keeps opening up, and then that's how your experiences grow. And then you start to hear those little words you might not have heard before, or you look at a photo and you automatically see that full colored apparition or that shadow figure or that face in that picture. You know what I'm saying there?
Definitely. Just to lend to what Dalton's talking about, for instance, with the ghost boxes, the spirit boxes, or utilizing the Ovulus or the SB7. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. The PSB7. They all throw out words, either audible wise or written. And here's the interesting thing. Over time, in the middle of it, normally, you don't really get to make sense of it. A lot of times, for me personally, I would say 95% of the time, it doesn't make sense. Now, the next day, when you go to review everything, you're going to start seeing patterns or things that make sense when you look at a catalog of 80, 95 words, if you were lucky. And then you're going to be like, wait a minute, look at this. You know, hypothetically speaking, well, the major event that happened back in the day, unfortunately, with the surmise of someone that passed away or whatever, or the death or the dueling or whatever, was on the north side of the property. And right here, you look, it says north, and then later down the list, it says property, and you start piecing stuff together and you're like, get out of here. The brain is automatically hardwired to want to make sense of things. It's an innate, natural ability that your brain does. For instance, if you're sleeping at night or attempting to, and you have a fan on, or you have a noise in the background, your brain will play tricks on you, making you think sometimes that you're hearing talking, or you're hearing words, or different things, because your brain is interpreting those frequencies and trying to make it make sense to you, so that way it becomes logical. The reason why I bring that up is this. All of this equipment, it's to be used with a grain of salt, and it's to be used as an assistant compared to going into a situation with already having gleaned information by doing research prior. These devices are nice to have. There's a plethora out there. There's tons. But at the end of the day, with what me and Dalton do, privy to maybe some natural gifts that me and him both have, we utilize them and we acknowledge what, in turn, they give us information back to us. But it's not the holy grail of de facto, hey, it said this is it. And that's something I want to caution everybody on, is equipment is just that. It's there to give you extra insight if and when it does. As
And
far as it
I'll
goes.
tell you something too. I would rely on a digital recorder probably now, like I said, that ghost radar is very unique, and I'm not trying to throw them a prop or tell people to go buy it or nothing like that. I'm just saying it is a tool that I use, and it does work. And um, I know there's probably some people are going to listen to this and probably laugh a little bit, but that's fine. It worked for me. You've seen it work. Other people have seen it work, but I still would go play back a digital recorder, because when you hear, like, you didn't hear nothing during the investigation, and you play it back, and all of a sudden that voice comes through on your recorder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's undisputable.
Yeah,
to me.
And it is undisputable. If you point blank ask a question, okay, and let's just say you throw a question out there that's very simple, like, you know, are you still around? Yes or no? And then you replay the quarter back and you hear yes or no. Okay, first of all, the odds of that for answering yes or no are 50-50. The odds of being able to get those two particular words to be able to be manifested or come back in a recording right then and there, I can't even do the math on that. You know, I'm good at
No, the
math, but
math
I'm
is,
not going to.
and sometimes, and a lot of times, as you know, it ain't just a yes or a no. It's yes, I'm here, or yes, I hear you. I mean, they actually talk. You know what I'm saying? So that's why
Yep.
I said, when I use a digital recorder, um, which is one of the tools that we do use,
Mm-hmm.
um, when I use a digital recorder, I kind of play on that a little bit more than I would the Ovilus, because you know what? I'll be honest with you. Some investigations I go to, I don't really have the patience to sit there and try to go through all the single words to try to, and which it does. Some of them single words do relate to the investigation. The next day or the 2 days later, you'll think about the word and you'll go, "Oh crap, this is this is what it's trying to say. I figured it out now." No, but with the digital recorder, that pretty much almost tells me what's going on right then and there at that very moment. I can play that back and then hear the voices. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, without a doubt. And something else that's really interesting, I did a lot of research specifically into recordings, and some investigators will not alter a recording any which way, shape, or fashion. And what I mean by that is there's a variety of sound software programs out there that you can kind of clean them up, auto tune them, make them sound less bassy or less high pitch or noisy, or get rid of things. A lot of automated processes can be applied to a recorded sound because they don't want to change the integrity of what it is they have gotten. And that's fully fine, and I fully respect their decision for that. I myself, I like listening to raw footage / evidence. Uh, Sometimes my gut instinct says, "Hey, there's more here." And what I mean by that is you can, from my experience, get a sound where you ask a question and then you play it back, and all you hear is, and you're like, "What is that?" And that's
Yep.
that part where everybody's brain's going, "Oh, he said, yeah, I want a cheeseburger," or he said, "Yeah, this way," hypothetically speaking, whatever. Or he said this or that, or he said one word. So here's the cool thing. More times than not, by utilizing software programs that are specialized, for the few that I have used, I have been able to take that little garbled sound, slow it down, and I have been able to receive out of that slowed down sound either a sentence or multiple words, one after another, that painted a picture that was clear as day, almost as if I was talking to you right now, the way you're listening to this podcast. And it was like, whoa, what just happened. And the thing is that everybody has to remember we have our faculties. We can smell, we can taste, we can touch, we can see, we can hear. On the other side, I believe everything is a manifestation of energy. That's it. So when things happen, we may not perceive it as it's being generated or said on the other side. Our devices that we have on this side, as I call it, may not be able to pick things up correctly for multitude of reasons, which I won't get into right now. So if and when anybody has software or different things to try to gleam into and see what evidence they have, it can give you a lot more definition and answer. And, with that being said, I can wholeheartedly say for one particular investigation that I did to help a family, the information that I was able to get by sleuthing around on recorded audio files that I had was able to give definitive answers to things that were relevant to them and their lives that was happening for over a year time period. Now, at the same token, I didn't get anything at that particular residence EMF related. I didn't get anything for light play. I didn't get anything for shadows. I didn't get anything for sounds or knocking. I didn't get cold spots or hot spots. But I sure did get 3, maybe 4 max legible recordings that I was able to glean information from and then go back and pose it to the family. It didn't make sense to me. I had no idea. But to them, it meant the world to them because they were able to fill in the pieces in the puzzle and tell me how it was relevant to them. So,
and it's weird how it works like that.
It does.
It's weird how it works.
It does.
Because you can go into an investigation and not get nothing. And you're like, all right, we didn't really get nothing. And I'm always telling people, well, just wait, because now we got to go over the digital cameras that we had set up. We got to go over the camera footage. We got to go over the digital recorder footage.
Yep.
And to go back to the point of the voices, two prime examples of that. One is at St. Albans. I mentioned St. Albans sanitarium or whatever, the psych ward or whatever up there in Virginia.
Yep.
And I was there with certain people. I'm not going to name drop or anything, but I was there with certain people, and we were down in the shock treatment area where they used to do the shock treatment on them. And we had mentioned we weren't getting nothing. We weren't getting nothing. And so I spoke up and I started talking like, man, I'm actually kind of hungry. And the guy that I was with, he kind of looked at, I guess he looked at me, whatever. It was dark. But anyway, he just said, I wonder what the food was like here. And I said, I bet it sucked. All of a sudden.
Yeah, that sounds like a you comment through and through there, brother.
I know, right? So I'm like, I bet it sucked. Well, the K2 lit up like strong, like red, boom, like automatically red. And so he was like, wow. So I'm sitting there and I go, okay, did you work here? Nothing. Were you, incarcerated here is, I guess, the word I want to use. A resident, to be nice. Were you a resident here? And it went strong red again. And so he said something about, man, I could use a good burger with some fries. And it lit up red again. So long story short, I said, bro, I could use a fat steak and some mashed potatoes. And you just heard this disembodied voice go, yes. Now, this wasn't played back on a recorder. This wasn't, at that time, this was a disembodied voice. If anybody don't know what that is, that's a spirit manifesting enough power to be able to speak. in the area that you're in, and you can hear them clearly with your own ear. So this is nothing over a recorder or nothing. So, but now that was clear. Like we looked, everybody, there's 3 or 4 of us in there, and I'm like, did y'all just hear that? And everybody's like, yes, we did. And the one guy, I'm not going to say his name, but he's like, I heard a yes. And I'm like, that's what I heard. And everybody's like, that's what I heard. So that was clear. So obviously we played it back on the recorder. We already knew, and it clearly on the recorder said yes. So now the second one, this is at our most famous topic that we had the other night, or the other podcast, the May Stringer house. Okay.
Where's that? Where's the May Stringer house at?
Brooksville, Florida.
Okay.
North of Tampa. So we're investigating with a handful. Actually, Tracy, that was her. You remember Tracy?
Yes.
Okay. Before that was her last investigation with us before she moved. So it was cool because this was a cool thing that happened. So I was talking about the children. The Mel meter, again, the Mel meter was, I looked down at the Mel meter, I'm getting a 2.4, 2.5, whatever it was. And I'm like, all right, we got somebody's, and we were in the children's room, where the cradle is, the one that you're not supposed to touch.
Mm-hmm.
The little crib with the old doll, the doll that was like really old, but you're not supposed to touch the crib, the little baby crib it's a toy crib basically with a doll in it. So we're in the children's room. And I start talking about, long story short, you remember the first daughter, supposedly she fell off the balcony and broke her arm or something. You remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
Okay, so the story is, if I got this right, and I remember right, because I haven't been there in a while, but I'm remembering that she fell off. The story is that she fell off accidentally off the balcony, and she hurt herself. She broke her arm or injured her arm or something. Anyway, so I'm talking to the children. Now, it happens to be the children of Frank Saxon. And long story short, again, I get into the point where I'm asking, did you push her off the balcony? So this wasn't an accident. If you pushed her, can you bring it down to 1.8? So the millimeter dropped to 1.9 or something.
And you're referencing the EMF, electromagnetic frequency, in the environment right now, correct?
Yes, they are. So the millimeter, the 2.4, 2.5 is the actual EMF reading. It's not the ambient temperature reading, of course.
Wow, that's pretty beefy.
Yeah, so she brought it down. She or he, they brought it down to 1.9. And so what happened was I kept pushing. Now, you know me, we always talk about not provoking the entities, but every now and then I'll admit it, I got to, just to get the answer. I got to push that little boundary to get the answer. And so on this instant, there's this loud voice that comes from the room across the hall, and all we heard was roo, 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 roo. So here it is. It's very clear, right? So I say, did y'all just hear that? And they're like, yeah. So I said, well, let's stop all the gear, stop everything, cut off, shut down everything. There was 2 people sitting downstairs. I went over and asked them, was this your phone go off? They said, no. I said, did you hear that voice? They're like, we didn't hear nothing. So that's a whole nother conversation of entities allowing certain people to hear or smell things and others not to. But they said they didn't hear nothing. So we played it back. And here is an example of where that technology that you're talking about, that software, a good solid software, not a cheap one, but a good one. We probably could have downloaded that to a laptop and cleared it up pretty quick and figured out what it was saying. Instead, I'm playing back the digital recorder, and of course my camera was still going. It's kind of funny. We were still filming us discussing what this thing just said. And I said, I thought it said something. The guy thought it said, finally, the guy that I was with, a friend of ours, he had stated, I hear something about an accident. And at first I'm like, I don't really hear that. So anyway, long story short, it did say this entity yelled from across the hall, and and he even had a weird pitch. So what he said was, it was an accident, like that. That's exactly
How,
what he said.
how do you say it again?
It was an accident.
Okay.
Kind of like with meaning,
With
like he was
emphasis.
mad.
Okay, so he said it.
Yes.
He said it with conviction.
Conviction. Yes, that's a good word, because he was mad that I was interrogating the kids. So that had to be Frank Saxon, first of all.
Interrogating or questioning. Those are two different meanings. Two different meanings.
I don't know. You're right. I don't know how you would interrogate a ghost anyway. But anyway, so in his mind, my questioning, let's just say my questioning would be the proper term. My fault. But let's just say he did not like my questioning, and yelled out from across the hall, which we heard the voice physically in our ear. I've heard the voice, but you couldn't make it out. You just heard the rumble. But you knew what it was. You just couldn't understand what it was saying. So again, my point was, the first one we heard was clear as day, and you get those. And then the second one, like you were talking about, you just get a noise, like a mumbling, but it was a voice. So yes, the software is a cool thing to have for sure. It's definitely a good device.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that there, Dalton. Software is definitely a boon to use when you can utilize it with multiple devices to help assist you with the discovery process and looking at results to see what may be beneficial for the investigation, depending on what's yielded. So I definitely enjoy utilizing software when I can, just to see what may be there. So
Yeah, and there's a bunch of things we haven't talked about: the FLIR, the REM pod, the SLS, the cameras, the laser grid, the ion generator. Um, we can talk about all that in another subject. I did want to throw the email thing back out. What was our email info? Something paranormal?
yes, we have a email address. Anybody is welcome to pose questions or correct us if we misspoken anything. We're definitely about accountability. Or if anybody wants to share any images or audio or anything that they've captured themselves and they just want our opinion, we are more than happy to take a look at any submissions and give our feedback back.
And if you're going to take photos, I got to say it every time. I will say it every time. If you take photos and send us photos, make sure you take more than one. Take 3 or 4, so we can look at the before and the after, and then the middle part being actually what you caught, so we can, don't send one photo and go, here's what I caught, because then I'm going to get in debunking mode, and it's not fair to the person sending in the photo. So make sure you take multiple photos of the same spot.
Yeah, that's definitely good information. And that just gives us more opportunities and options to be able to see everything instead of just having one to debate back and forth on, which can definitely be interesting between me and Dalton since we're varied of opinion sometimes. But
That's what makes us us, man. What are you talking about?
but if anybody does have any questions, like I said, it's info@theoryparanormal.com. And you can do your submissions to there. So, with that being said, we actually did receive an email by an individual.
Oh, we did.
Yes, we sure did. By an individual by the name of Mel, and she actually posed a 3-question email to us.
3 questions.
3 questions, not one but 3. So
holy smokes, look out!
I guess she had a few things on her mind that she wanted to know.
Well, I like to say hi, Mel.
Hi, Mel. How you doing today? We're definitely more than happy to answer this. And if anybody has any questions, there you go. So the first question that Mel posed was, what advice would you give kids who can see things and are afraid of them? So I am interpreting this as maybe the kids may be gifted and can see spirits or entities or other things that we don't have a term or phrase for potentially. So I'll let you lead first there, Mr. Dalton. What's your 2 cents on that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know how old the kid is. Is the child below 10 years old, over 10 years old, a teenager? Because that kind of intrigues me on. It would intrigue me on how old the child is. Like my youngest daughter, she was in her early teens, I would say, and I don't. It's hard to give some even a growing person advice, because on one part they might be kind of scared of it. On the other part, they're still intrigued. Um, or what's the word I'm looking for? They're interested. They want to. Why is this? You know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they have that aptitude, that fire of wanting to understand.
yeah, the human sense is automatically like, okay, I know I'm afraid of it, but I'm also interested a little bit in what I'm actually looking at. So with my daughter, I can kind of tell her what I told my daughter, was just try to ignore it. If you're that afraid of it, the best thing you can do is not show it any attention. Uh, just ignore it. So what she used to do was, when she saw something at the end of her bed, let's say rolling over, she opened her eyes for a second, something standing there, she just closed her eyes, or she might go away, tell it to go away, um, or she'll just wave at it and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" and go to sleep. But she won't give it a lot of attention, and I don't think. And I try to tell her, don't give it a lot of attention, because my opinion, we'll go with the opinions again. My opinion is, when you give it the attention it wants, it's going to stick around, and it's going to become. It'll be able to do more. So, if that makes sense to you.
So what you're referencing, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is you're referencing any energy exerted towards said item or entity or whatever the case may be, will play into giving it attention, and so therefore it potentially can entice or make future scenarios happen.
Right, and also the fear. Um, the fear, we have kind of shown that fear, that the entities can also play off your fear. So try to understand that if the entity or the spirit is not being malicious in any kind of way. Now, again, I'm going to say it again. This is all of our opinions on this. Um, if the entity is not being malicious, not touching, not doing anything, then try not to show the fear. Try not to do the fear. As kids, growing up as a kid myself, I was scared. That's a normal thing. Humans, that's your first reaction, is fear. The hardest thing is not to throw that fear out there, because that energy, they'll feed off of that as well. So it's
Yep,
hard to do, but
yep, definitely understand that. And I want all the listeners to just imagine this. I usually go with my first analogy, so apologize if it puts anybody off. But imagine being in a car driving down the road. You're about to go through an intersection. It's a green light. You're fine, and you're halfway through the intersection, and the car to your left decides to run a red light and go right through the intersection. And you're about to T-bone that car, and that car skates by, and at the last second, you slam on the brakes. Now, imagine you being the driver of slamming on the brakes of that vehicle. Think about where you would be in your head at that moment. where your chest would be at that moment, how you would feel all over your body at that moment. Okay? All of that going on at the same time, that's energy. That energy gets projected outward all around you from things that I believe in. Now, in the same sense, it doesn't have to be a car wreck or a car accident, but it can be any life's events that can make you push stuff out, hypothetically. And that is what I'm gleaming from what Dalton is talking about, is putting out fear. Sure, it's a descriptive word, and it's something that people can be like, nope, I'm not doing it mentally. But then you have all the other physiological responses, your blood pressure, your eye dilation, quickening of your pulse, sweating, all these different things are a way of manifesting energy. So it's hard to do. It's when you're in a situation, especially being very young, it's hard to get a grasp on it or to understand things. I can actually attest and speak for myself. When I was a young man, under 10, I used to be able to wake up and see individuals standing around my bed. And for me, I never talked to anybody about it, and B, um, there wasn't a way for me to say this is normal or this is not normal. So it was literally as if my sister came in and said something to me, and I woke up, rolled over, saw her, and just rolled back over and went to sleep. That's how I dealt with it personally at a young age. At the end of the day,
And that's pretty good way. That's a pretty good way to deal with it.
Now, for my personal opinion on it, uh, I believe from what I have gleaned from talking to dozens upon dozens of individuals that are gifted, who have children, I've noticed there's three types of families. You have one type of family to where nothing ever gets acknowledged, doesn't make a difference who experiences what, who may be able to see something, who may be able to hear something, who may be able to feel energy. Doesn't make a difference. Have dreams come true. Whoever it is, okay, hypothetically speaking, being a teenager or a child or whatever, their whole life, they don't talk to anybody because they don't want to be chastised. They don't want to have the stigma. They don't want to go to the doctors. They don't want the medications. They don't want problems. So they keep it to themselves. Then there are families who are aware and know lineage wise amongst the family, there may be an aptitude for family members to be gifted. So at a certain particular point in time in their life, rather it's as coming of age, becoming a teenager, or maybe waiting until they're a full grown adult, then the parents or the grandparents or somebody, maybe a sibling, will have that conversation saying, hey, this is normal. This is part of our family. It's that special little bond communication. The other way I have seen it is there are families that actually embrace it at a very young age. And they're not going to have the cold hard talk with their children saying, hey, do you see, boogeymen? Do you hear things? Not to that extent, but maybe saying, hey, I'm thinking of a number. If I'm thinking of a number, what number am I thinking of? And seeing what the children are replying back with. Playing small games like that to gauge the aptitude of the child. But what I'm getting at is that the third type of family is the family that fosters, or I don't want to say welcomes, but is acceptable and is understanding that there's more going on there than compared to a quote unquote normal family that's not gifted. And going forward in that journey, they bring that person up to speed and let them know it's normal and okay, but hey, maybe not talk about it in person with friends, or bring it up to certain individuals except whoever that person is. And the reason why
So
go ahead.
no, go ahead, brother.
The reason why I bring up these three different family viewpoints is because at the end of the day, how children or kids, let me rephrase that, may handle this is going to be dependent upon the way that gifts, as I call them, are fostered and understood and embraced in the local family dynamic. I've seen it go three ways. Either,
Well, like for me, I've only been one way. Like none of my family that I know of,
mm-hmm,
um, has the intuition of what I do. Um, so for me, I guess I'm family number one. I kind of see where you're going. Like, you got one family that doesn't have a past history, and the kid doesn't want to talk about it. The
right,
child doesn't want to talk about it. Then
right,
you got the other one that kind of thinks they got somebody that's got gifted, and they think it got handed down. Once the child opens up and tells the family a little bit, then and the third one, they obviously know that their past family's gifted, and so obviously the child's gifted, and they're pretty accepted about it.
right.
So I would say this though. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I agree with it. I agree with those scenarios. I would say what helped me is if the child can describe, again, I don't know how old the child is.
Mm-hmm.
So if the child can describe what they're seeing to the mother,
Right, and that may
bec-
that may help out. Obviously, what's going on.
right? Because right now this child is seeing something and is scared. Okay, so what if it's a grandfather, a past uncle, a past loved one that passed away? So what I would say, Mel, and you can agree or not, Pax. What I say, Mel, to do is to try to get your child to describe what they're seeing and see if that person, if they can, if that person uh, sounds familiar to anybody that you know in your family that passed away. Now, it could be somebody further down the tree line in the family history that passed away and you've never seen a photo. So at first, you might be like, no, I don't know this person, but you might want to ask other family members like your grandparents, hey, does this person sound, if I describe this person, do they sound familiar to you, kind of thing? You understand what I'm saying there?
No, I completely do. I completely do. And just to jump on your tailcoats there, coattails there. My bad. It's been a
At least you
long
ain't
day.
saying,
Long day.
yeah, it has. But at least you ain't talking about veal no more. So, all right, we'll go to.
Right. He's referencing a veal comment I made in one of our podcasts earlier. Yeah, at the end of the day, the best advice that I could honestly though give in reference of any kids that are afraid of things that they see is just let them know that you are understanding of that they see things, even though maybe mommy or daddy or the grandparents or the brother or sister, whoever, may not have that aptitude or capability, and encourage them to let you know when it happens. That way you can track, hey, what's going on? Because, you know, kids are very impressionable, and all parents know that at a young age. And I believe psychologically, I'm probably going to butcher this, but I want to say between the ages of 5 or 6 to 7, that's literally when a child's worldviews start developing around them and get hard coded 100%.
I would say even earlier than that. I would
Um,
say
well, with the
2 or
internet,
3 years
yeah.
old. I've seen, yeah, I've seen children at 2 or 3, reacting to something.
Well,
Um,
but what I'm trying to touch base on is these situations could paint a picture of why they might be acting out or not want to do certain things that they've always been accustomed to doing, different behavior, different mannerisms, things of that nature. So that's why I would say it would be smart to try to keep tabs on the kids and say, hey, if this happens, let us know. And that way you can just go from there. Um, but
and
also,
and I'm gonna boil it. Go ahead.
I was going to say
Sorry about
also,
that.
no, it's okay. Also, at the end of the day, reinforce the focus of just don't pay any energy to it. That let them know that you're always going to be there in their lives, that you're there to support them and love them and take care of them. Because that's, if anything, one of the biggest foundations of anything in the paranormal that I've encountered and seen is the conviction of your belief system and what you believe in, which me and Dalton talked about before. That right there gives focus, energy, and power to one's psyche, to one's mental well being, emotional, mental, and other things. So that's the other thing.
And I would just say, to boil all this down for the first question, I would one time um, have them describe what they're seeing, and don't push it off to, oh, you're just seeing things, honey, don't worry about it. No, get a little active with that, because I try to tell folks, like I think I mentioned it before in another podcast, that the parents will sit there and go, oh, they're talking to their imaginary friend. It ain't nothing. And I'll sit there and go, well, what if they are talking to somebody that you don't actually know that they're really talking to somebody? You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
you know, um, our advice as a team, and I think Pax would agree, is try to figure out what they're actually seeing and who they're seeing, if they can describe them or not, and then try to get them to shut it down. Pay them no mind, pay no attention. But if it winds up being a past loved one, and that person's description, then I would actually sit there and tell them whatever about this past loved one. So that way that fear will go away, that they know that, okay, this is a family member. It's not just some stranger I'm seeing in the room. And again, I don't know how old the child is. That plays a big part into it. But I would say that kind of wraps that. That's the best advice that I could do for that.
And if it is an individual that nobody knows, period, then it might be associated to the land, or it could be associated to uh, uh, something that was brought into the house. It could be clothes, it could be jewelry, it could be furniture, you name it. There's tons of things that can be associated with energy. But
That's true. It could be an item.
Yep. But definitely a great question there, Mel. And
So what's the second one?
the second one is going to be, what's your favorite piece of equipment to use? We did already touch base the majority of this podcast about equipment that me and Dalton have used. But if you just want to throw a shout out to something that you like using real quick there, Dalton.
I'm going to go back to what I said in the very beginning, probably the mail meter, because it has a good story behind it on why it was created. And it is an actual multi-device tool that's good to have. I mean, we use it all the time. So I would say the mail meter
Okay.
is probably one of my favorite. Probably close to the top three. Probably two. I'd say top two. I wouldn't really know what the second one is, because like I use so much gear, but I would say the mail meter is probably it.
Okay. Mine, and likewise, I touched base on it earlier. It would be a ghost box or a radio box or a spirit box, whatever you want to call it. Just because of the fact you can get feedback and legible voices. It's one thing to have a flashlight go on and off, an EMF detector, bells and whistles if it makes sound, or the lights go off, or seeing temperature drops or increase. That's always fun. But to be able to have definitive voices come back at you, that's, to me, there's almost nothing better than that, except potentially being, grabbed or scratched, or hearing voices, or even seeing up to an etherical being right in front of you, like a manifestation.
And it's undisputable. That's
Yeah.
probably my second. That'd probably be my second, because it's undisputable evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, you can like on the digital recorder, sometimes if somebody moves, or I mean, I not to say nothing for nothing. I mean, I've heard my stomach growl on a digital recorder and be like, I had to tag it. That's my stomach growling.
Yep.
So yeah, the spirit box, Frank's box, or whatever, whichever one you're using at the time. I agree on that.
Okay. The last question is dicey because it can be a hornet's nest of an answer. We won't jump too big in, but the question is bucket list of places you're looking forward to investigating. I think to make it simple for everybody, because I know it's been a long podcast, we're sitting at almost an hour and 37 minutes now. We'll just go with the top two places that you want to investigate next.
Um, I don't really have a top two, but I'm always down for Civil War battlefields or I think my biggest I just like, I mean, everybody goes to like the sanitariums, the hospitals, or the jails. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I see a lot of people doing that. You don't really see anybody doing Civil War stuff like the Octagon Hall is a house, or like I think one group might have done a famous group. They might have done Appomattox one time. I'm really interested in that place, but Civil War based. Um, I know that you're driven on a certain thing that you've been wanting to do, but I think for me, I'm Civil War based. Anything Civil War, I'm down because to me the jails, the sanitariums, the hospitals, the schools, all that's kind of played out for me. I've been there and done it, but to actually get on a Civil War battlefield or get into a house that was part of the Civil War and actually take that history and bring it to life, I think that's I'm always down for that next Civil War investigation.
Okay, that's always fun. From what I've investigated with those sites. Um, for myself, I like history a lot. Um, I know that's a horrible pun because everything in the paranormal, for the most part, is based on history.
Not
But
everything, but yeah.
but for me, it sounds, you know, for me myself, with America, I like the 13 colonies.
There
Just
you go.
just because it, I no discrediting any other history before the 13 colonies. There's tons and tons to everybody that was already a part of this land before uh, other individuals showed up. But what I mean by the 13 colonies is just the richness and the heritage of so much going on back when all those places were being developed. The amount of energy that was being thrown around with people moving and coming and going, all the different diversities, all the different people that spoke all the different languages, all the different things going on. They were all mecca hub centers for civilization. And I wholeheartedly believe there's still tons of residual energy at all different places. Like, for instance, I went to Jamestown up in Virginia. Amazing. I loved it. Walking down a cobblestone road that was literally there back in the day when things were budding up and coming. You can't beat that. And being able to walk into a place that's been there for 100 years and then another 100 years, and it's like the history, the richness. Uh, for me, being a person that is intuitive and at times can feel in the environment energy, it's special and unique sometimes when I go into certain locations because I am getting more from the environment than just, hey, how you doing? Yeah, can I get a latte or double mocha, frappa, casa, chino, double express whip, with extra cream and a little bit of caramel drizzle with chocolate on the side. And, call me
You
Santa.
actually drank that crap?
You can call me Santa Claus. No, but my whole point is that it could be a simple place like a coffee house, and to everybody else, it's just a coffee house. But when I go in, I see physically it's a coffee house, but then my senses pick up, and it's that much more. So I enjoy going to places with deep, rich history. So
And you can play that. That's kind of like that's an interesting. The 13 colonies. That's very interesting. That would be something very interesting. I would put that second behind. Of course, you know why I do the Civil War stuff,
Oh yeah.
but the 13 colonies, man, that would just be. I mean, that's the foundation of America, right? So.
Yep. Some would say yes on that last statement. Um, it's just something that's always fascinated me, just because the fact every single colony was different in its own right and virtue for everything that they were doing and what they had at the time and what they were trying to do on certain levels. Um, so it's just always been a fascination to me, and it probably, not to say I'm biased, but I went to Jamestown as a small kid back in the day, so I wouldn't be surprised if that lend credence to where my fascination came and started with the 13 colonies. But nonetheless, that's where it's at. So
Yeah, the 13 colonies, I believe they were also known as the British colonies in the beginning before they became the 13 colonies. So, yeah, there's a lot of before they declared their declaration or whatnot. So, yeah, that's a whole nother subject there.
whole nother subject. So with that being said, that is all the time that we have today. We definitely appreciate.
And we'd like to thank Mel.
Without a doubt. Thank you, Mel, for the excellent questions. Most people will send in one, but Mel decided to send us in three.
So. Send us in as much as you want. Who cares, man? We're all.
Yep.
It might take us an hour to answer it because we do kind of go to left field. But
yep. And if you do have any more experiences with that, or you have any other questions, please feel free to email back, and we can go from there. But
don't try to engage either. Don't try to take photos because anything that you do to engage with this entity, unless you know that it's friendly I want to say, I didn't want to throw this out there, but I'm going to say you got to kind of watch what you're doing because sometimes they like to play games. But that's why I always tell people don't try to engage with it. Just try to ignore it.
Yep. So, as a reminder, if anybody has any questions going forward about anything that we spoke about in tonight's podcast, want to point anything out to us, send us anything as far as evidence goes that you want to have us view and reply back to, or just simple questions in general, please feel free to email us at info@theoryparanormal.com. And as always, don't be afraid to ask questions.